conflict, but the presence of courage. A murmur of agreement rose through the chamber. Even the most cautious delegates nodded. The Iron Accord, once seen as a rash alliance, was now being studied as a new model for galactic security. Plans were already underway to expand it, to include more voices, more safeguards, more truth. After the session, Daniel walked with Laura along the station's outer promenade. Below them, Viridia Prime turned slowly, its green clouds swirling like dreams. Ships from a dozen species docked peacefully at the newly renamed Unity Station, a place once used only for trade, now a symbol of shared vigilance. "They'll rebuild the Varn," Laura said softly. "Not the same leaders, not the same hate. But the people, they'll survive." "Good," Daniel replied. "Because war shouldn't be about destroying a species. It should be about stopping the ones who choose darkness." Back on Earth, celebrations were quiet. There were no parades, no grand speeches in city squares. Instead, families gathered at memorial walls, placing flowers beside names of the lost. In schools, children learned not just about the Battle of Cinderdrift, but about the cost of silence. President Elena Ruiz stood before the United Earth Assembly and said only this: "We fought not to conquer, but to remain. And in doing so, we found friends we never knew we had." Weeks later, Daniel stood on the surface of Luna, at the edge of the Sea of Serenity. The sun rose slowly over the cratered horizon, painting the gray dust in gold. Around him stood Laura, Owen, Torres, and President Ruiz. Before them, a simple stone monument bore the names of every human life lost during the clean sweep attacks and the battle that followed. Daniel stepped forward. A crowd had gathered, humans, Lumen, Mur, Tel, even a few Krell observers. They had come not just to mourn, but to listen. "We sounded the alarm not to start a war," Daniel said, his voice carrying in the thin lunar air, "but to end the illusion of peace built on silence. Now we build something stronger, not with weapons, but with vigilance, truth, and the courage to stand together." He placed a small earth rock at the base of the monument. Laura added a data chip containing the final logs of the vanished ships. Owen laid down a pilot's insignia. Torres placed a folded flag. Ruiz set down a single white flower, grown in a dome on Mars. As they turned to leave, ships from the Iron Accord lifted off in silent salute. Human destroyers, Lumen cruisers, Mur scouts, Tel carriers flying in perfect formation toward the stars. The war was over, but the work had just begun. In the months that followed, Daniel took on a new role, not as a diplomat of Earth, but as the first human representative to the Reformed Security Council, a body born from the ashes of the old. Laura led a new intelligence division focused on early threat detection, working closely with Lumen truthseers. Owen trained joint crews from all Accord species, teaching them not just tactics but trust. And Admiral Torres, now retired from active command, advised on fleet coordination across allied worlds. Peace did not mean ease. There were still tensions, still misunderstandings, still old fears that flared in the dark. But now, when a ship went missing, no one waited weeks to act. When a signal seemed strange, no one called it human panic. They listened. They checked. They stood together. One evening, long after the last memorial had been visited and the last report filed, Daniel sat alone on the observation deck of Unity Station. The stars outside were countless, cold and beautiful. He thought of the 200 ships that had vanished without a sound. He thought of Laura bleeding on the deck. He thought of the half-second gap in the Varn cloaks, the pulse of light from the Lumen, the roar of human railguns in the void. He had not wanted war, but he had not run from it either, and because of that, children on distant colonies would grow up knowing their voices mattered. Because of that, truth had a place at the table. Because of that, the galaxy was a little less lonely. He stood, turned off the lights and walked back into the station, where humans and aliens shared meals, traded stories and kept watch over the peace they had earned, not been given. The time for war had come. And because they faced it together, the time for something better had finally arrived. The days that followed were a whirlwind of planning, testing, and quiet resolve. Human engineers worked side by side with Lumen artisans, merging human firepower with alien precision. Mir scouts mapped Varn patrol routes. Tal pilots trained human crews in evasive maneuvers through asteroid fields. And through it all, Daniel kept one thought in his mind. This was not about revenge. It was about survival. about showing the galaxy that small voices could still be heard. That truth, once spoken, could not be erased. Then came the message from the outer colonies. A distress signal, faint, broken, but real, from the mining outpost on Cinderdrift. "They're coming," the voice crackled. "Hundreds of ships. We can't hold them." Daniel turned to Owen. "That's our line." Owen nodded. "Then we meet them there." The Aurora light lifted from Viridia Prime within the hour, joined by the first wave of the Terran Defense Fleet. Behind them, Lumen vessels shimmered into formation, their quartz hulls glowing like stars given shape. Mirror fighters darted like silver fish through the void. Tail cruisers, broad and silent, brought up the rear. As the fleet jumped to warp, Daniel stood on the bridge watching the stars stretch into lines of light. He thought of the vanished ships, of Laura bleeding on the deck, of the Council's doubt. And he knew one thing for certain: the time for war had come. Not because humanity wanted it, but because they would no longer let anyone else decide when it began. The asteroid belt of Cinderdrift hung in the void like a graveyard of broken worlds, jagged rocks tumbling slowly in the pale light of a distant red sun. It was here, in this silent maze of stone and shadow, that the first real battle of the war would begin. Admiral Frank Torres stood on the bridge of the command ship Resolute, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Red blips swarmed the edges of the screen. 300 Varn vessels moving in perfect formation, their biohulls pulsing with dark energy. Against them, the Iron Accord fleet numbered less than half. Daniel Carter stood nearby, not in uniform, but in a simple gray tunic, his role now that of observer and advisor. Laura Bennett sat at a comm station, her face pale but focused, her fingers dancing over the console despite the lingering pain in her side. Owen Grant paced near the weapons array, his jaw tight, ready to give the order to fire the moment Torres gave the word. "They're not hiding anymore," Torres said quietly. "They want us to see them. They want us to run." "We won't run," Daniel replied. The Varn fleet advanced slowly, confidently. They had superior numbers, heavier armor, and their dreaded bioplasma cannons, weapons that could melt through steel like butter. The Accord ships held position, human destroyers flanking the sleek, glowing forms of the Lumen vessels, with Mir scouts darting ahead like nervous birds. Then the first shot rang out, not from the Varn but from a human railgun. A streak of metal, moving faster than sound, slammed into the lead Varn dreadnought. The impact tore a hole through its side, green ichor spilling into space like blood and water. The battle began. Chaos erupted. Varn ships returned fire, their plasma bolts turning asteroids into molten slag. Human fighters twisted through the debris, launching missiles that exploded in silent bursts of fire. Lumen ships raised shimmering energy shields, absorbing blasts that would have shattered human hulls. Mirror drones zipped between enemy lines, jamming Varn sensors with bursts of static. But the Varn were relentless. Their numbers pressed in from all sides. A Tel cruiser vanished in a flash of green light, overwhelmed by 3 Varn hunters. 2 human destroyers broke apart under sustained fire, their crews lost before they could eject. "We're losing ground," Owen shouted over the din of alarms. Torres didn't flinch. "Hold the line. We knew this would hurt." Daniel watched the carnage unfold on the main screen, his stomach churning. This wasn't diplomacy. This was slaughter. But he also knew there was no other way. If they fell here, the Varn would march straight to Earth. Then Laura gasped. "I've got something." She pulled up a new frequency on her console, her eyes wide. "It's a Varn command channel. They're coordinating cloak shifts every 90 seconds. But there's a gap just half a second when their systems reset." Owen frowned. "Half a second isn't enough to target them." "It is," Laura said, "if we know when it's coming." She turned to Daniel. "Remember what the Lumens said about harmonic pulses? Their cloaks run on bioresonance. If we hit them with the right frequency at the exact reset moment, we can overload their systems." Daniel's mind raced. "Can we do it?" Laura nodded, already typing. "I can predict the next reset window, and I can send the pulse command to the Lumen emitters." "Do it," Torres ordered. Laura's fingers flew. On the screen, the Lumen ships began to glow brighter, their quartz shells humming with stored energy. The Varn, sensing something, shifted formation, their cloaked scouts vanishing from view. 30 seconds, Laura said, her voice tight. The battle raged. A human frigate exploded nearby, shaking the Resolute. Alarms blared. Smoke filled one corner of the bridge. 10 seconds, Laura whispered. Then, now, she hit the key. A wave of pure resonance burst from the Lumen ships, a silent, invisible pulse that rippled through the asteroid field. For a single, perfect moment, every cloaked Varn vessel flickered into view, their systems flashing red as they overloaded. "Fire everything!" Torres roared. Human railguns thundered. Missiles streaked through space. Mer drones unleashed micro-warheads. The Varn fleet caught completely exposed, shattered under the onslaught. Dozens of ships exploded in chain reactions, their biohulls rupturing in clouds of green vapor. Others spun out of control, colliding with asteroids or each other. The tide turned. The remaining Varn ships broke formation, retreating in disarray. Their once proud armada was now a scattering of wounded predators fleeing a stronger pack. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence fell, broken only by the hiss of damaged systems and the soft beeping of consoles. "We did it," Owen said, disbelief in his voice. Torres let out a long breath. For now. Daniel looked at Laura, who slumped back in her chair, exhausted but smiling faintly. She had done it. She had found the crack in the enemy's armor, and they had driven a knife through it. But then a new message flashed on the main screen, a priority transmission, encoded in Varn High Command cipher. Laura decrypted it in seconds. The words appeared in plain text. "This is only the beginning." Daniel read them aloud, his voice quiet but firm. The others fell silent. Torres turned to the viewport, where the wreckage of the battle drifted like ghost ships. "They'll be back, stronger, smarter. Then we'll be ready," Daniel said. In the hours that followed, rescue teams combed the debris field, pulling survivors from escape pods and shattered hulls. Medics worked tirelessly in the Resolute's sickbay, tending to burns, fractures, and radiation sickness. Engineers patched holes in the ship's armor, their hands black with soot and grease. Laura, against orders, returned to her station. She had more signals to decode, more patterns to find. Owen coordinated with the Mer and Tel, planning new patrol routes. Torres sent a full report to President Ruiz, along with a list of the fallen. Daniel stood alone on an observation deck watching the stars. The victory felt hollow. Too many lives lost. Too much fire in the void. But he also knew this battle had done more than stop an invasion. It had proven something to the galaxy. That humanity, small and young as they were, would not be erased without a fight. And that they were not alone. As the fleet regrouped, forming a protective ring around the Cinderdrift outpost, Daniel made a silent promise. He would not let their sacrifice be in vain. The war was far from over, but for the first time they had hope and a chance. The war ended not with a final explosion, but with a quiet vote in the same chamber where it had begun. The Galactic Council gathered once more beneath the obsidian dome of Viridia Prime, but the air felt different now, lighter, yet heavier with memory. The Varn hegemony sat in silence, their tank dimmed, their delegation stripped of voting rights. Around them, the faces of 15 species carried the weight of what they had ignored and what they had finally seen. Daniel Carter stood at the center again, but this time he was not alone. Beside him stood Laura Bennett, her cane barely touching the floor, her eyes clear and steady. Behind them waited Owen Grant in his dress uniform, and beside him Admiral Frank Torres, his medals gleaming under the soft light. They had come not to plead, but to witness. Speaker Zorath of the Krell rose slowly, his chitinous plates clicking with solemn rhythm. "The Council has reviewed all evidence," he said, his voice stripped of its old skepticism. "The Varn hegemony violated the Treaty of Neutral Space, committed acts of unprovoked aggression, and attempted to erase an entire species through stealth and fear. Such actions cannot be forgiven. They cannot be forgotten." He turned to the Varn delegate. "You are hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. Your trade routes are closed, your military assets within neutral zones are forfeit, and your leadership will answer before the Tribunal of Cosmic Justice." The Varn made no sound. They simply sank into their tank, their light fading to gray. Then Zorath looked at Daniel. "And to humanity and the Lumen, the Mer, and the Tael, we offer our deepest regret. We failed to listen when you spoke the truth. But you did not fail us. You showed us that peace is not the absence of..." And a nervous silence, the way the Lumen had dimmed when he spoke of war. He knew he was walking a razor's edge. One misstep, and humanity would be branded the enemy of galactic peace. He was halfway through a cup of cold coffee when the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. The deck tilted sharply, throwing him against the wall. Explosion in docking bay 3. Owen's voice crackled over the intercom. All hands seal bulkheads. Daniel scrambled to his feet and ran. Smoke filled the corridor as he reached the bay. Emergency crews in fire-resistant suits were already spraying foam on twisted metal and sparking wires. The Aurora Lights shuttle, the one that carried their secure comms and escape pods, was gone, reduced to a blackened crater in the deck. Laura lay nearby, half buried under debris, blood streaking her temple. Medics rushed to her, shouting for a stretcher. Her eyes fluttered open as they lifted her. "Daniel," she whispered. "It wasn't an accident. I saw someone in maintenance gear." "Not ours." He knelt beside her. "Who?" She coughed, wincing. "Varn markings, under the sleeve." Then her eyes rolled back and she went still. The medics moved fast, injecting her with stabilizers before rushing her to the infirmary. Daniel stood slowly, his hands clenched into fists. Sabotage. On a neutral station, during active diplomatic talks. This wasn't just aggression, it was a message. The next morning, the council summoned him again. This time, the mood was different. The Varn delegate sat rigid in its tank, its skin pale with tension. Speaker Zorath's mandibles clicked faster than usual. "Diplomat Carter," the Krell began. "Your vessel suffered an unfortunate incident last night. A power surge, we are told." Daniel looked straight at the Varn. "It was a bomb, planted by someone wearing your colors." The Varn gurgled angrily. "You accuse us without proof. Your own systems are faulty. Your crew is careless." "Then why?" Daniel asked calmly. "Did our security footage show a figure with Varn insignia entering the bay an hour before the blast?" The chamber went quiet. The lumen flickered rapidly, yellow, then red. Zorath turned to the Varn. "Is this true?" The Varn delegate hesitated. Too long. "It must be a trick, a human trick." Laura, pale but awake, was wheeled into the chamber on a medical hover gurney. She held up a small data chip. "Footage is here," she said weakly. "Clear as day. And I ran a bioscan on the residue from the blast. It matches Varn-made explosives, standard issue for their covert ops." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Even the Krell looked troubled. Zorath raised a clawed hand for silence. "This is serious. If your claims hold, the Varn have violated the Treaty of Neutral Space." The Varn delegate surged upward. "We deny everything. This is a setup. Humans want war, so they create reasons." Daniel stepped forward. "We didn't blow up our own ship. We didn't vanish 200 of our own people. We didn't plant your explosives in our bay. You did all of it. And you thought no one would notice." He looked around at the council. "You wanted proof. Here it is. Not just data, not just signals. Blood, fire, lies caught in the act." For the first time, some of the delegates looked away from him, not in doubt, but in shame. They had ignored the warnings. Now, violence had reached their doorstep. The session ended without a verdict, but something had shifted. The Lumen requested a private meeting with Daniel afterward. Their light pulsed gently as they spoke through a soft-toned translator. "We believe you. We will help you find the truth." That night, back on the Aurora Light, Daniel sat by Laura's bedside. She was stable but exhausted. Owen stood in the doorway, arms crossed again, but his expression had softened. "They're scared," Owen said quietly. "Not of us. Of what's coming." Daniel nodded. "They've kept peace by pretending threats don't exist. But you can't negotiate with a ghost that's already inside your walls." Laura opened her eyes. "What now?" "Now," Daniel said, "we stop asking for permission to defend ourselves. We find out who's behind Clean Sweep, and we make sure they know humanity doesn't vanish quietly." Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, but for the first time in weeks, Daniel didn't feel alone. The war hadn't been declared yet, But the lines were drawn, and somewhere in the dark, the enemy was watching, waiting to see if humanity would break or fight back. The days after the sabotage passed in a blur of quiet tension and urgent whispers. Aboard the Aurora Light, repairs continued in the damaged docking bay, while security doubled at every airlock. Laura Bennett, still weak but stubbornly alert, worked from her medical bed, sifting through intercepted signals with one hand and an IV line in the other. Owen Grant coordinated with Earth's defense network, his voice low and steady during every encrypted call. And Daniel Carter walked the halls like a man carrying the weight of a world on his shoulders, because in a way he was. He knew the Council would not act quickly. They never did. But he also knew that silence now would be the same as surrender. So he made a choice. He reached out to the Lumen, their emissary, Kalen, met him in a quiet observation lounge on Viridia Prime. The Lumen did not sit or stand. They hovered gently in their quartz shells, their inner light shifting like slow-moving tides. Kalen had been the first to believe Daniel's warning, and now they listened without interruption as he laid out everything. The vanished ships, the Varn code, the bomb, Laura's evidence. When Daniel finished, Kalen pulsed a soft blue. Truth is not always loud, their translator murmured, but it always leaves a trace. We will examine your data with our own eyes. For 3 days, the Lumen were silent. They withdrew into their private chamber, where no sound or light escaped. The Council grew restless. The Varn demanded an immediate end to what they called human slander. Even some of the smaller species began to doubt again. But Daniel waited. He had learned that patience could be a weapon too. On the 4th morning, Kalen returned. Their light burned a clear, steady white, the Lumen sign of confirmed truth. We have verified your claims, Kalen said. The signals match Varn military encryption. The explosive residue is from their covert division, and the pattern of disappearances aligns with known Varn fleet movements. This was not random. It was planned. It was targeted. It was war. Daniel exhaled slowly. It wasn't just his word anymore. It was fact, spoken by one of the most respected truth-seekers in the galaxy. With the Lumen's backing, Daniel called for an emergency session of the Council. This time he did not plead. He proposed. The time for waiting is over, he said, standing once more in the great chamber. We cannot rely on old rules when new enemies ignore them. I propose the Iron Accord, a mutual defense pact between any species willing to stand against unprovoked attacks, not to start wars, but to stop them before they spread. The room stirred. The Krell clicked in concern. The Varn bubbled with rage. But then, slowly, others spoke up. The insectoid Myrrh, whose colonies had suffered pirate raids for years, voiced support. The ocean-dwelling Tile, long ignored by the major powers, agreed. Even the cautious Zenth, known for their neutrality, said they would consider it. In the end, only 4 species joined the Accord that day: humanity, the Lumen, the Myrrh, and the Tile. It was not a majority, but it was a start. Back on Earth, President Elena Ruiz watched the broadcast from the Council chamber. She did not smile, but her shoulders straightened. She called Admiral Frank Torres at once. Frank, she said, it's time. From hidden shipyards near Jupiter, from lunar dry docks, from orbital stations around Mars, the Terran defense fleet began to awaken. Engines hummed to life. Weapon systems ran diagnostics. Crews boarded in silence, knowing what was coming. Torres, a veteran of border skirmishes and peacekeeping runs, gave the order. Full readiness. No aggression, but no retreat either. That evening, President Ruiz addressed the people of Earth, and any listening ears beyond. Her face filled every screen, calm and resolute. We do not want war, she said. We never have. But we will not let fear silence us. We will not let lies hide the truth. And we will not stand by while others decide our fate. If peace must be defended with strength, then so be it. We are ready. Her words spread across the stars like ripples in a pond. Some called them brave, others called them reckless. But no one called them weak. Meanwhile, Daniel prepared for the next step. With the iron accord signed in digital ink and witnessed by the Lumen, he began coordinating with the new allies. The Mir offered sensor drones that could detect cloaked ships. The Tal shared ancient navigation routes through unstable nebulae, paths the Varn would never expect. And the Lumen began building harmonic emitters, devices that could disrupt stealth fields with pulses of pure resonance. Owen brought Daniel the latest intel. Varn fleets are massing near the Helios border, he said, pointing to a star map. Over 300 vessels. They're not hiding anymore. Daniel studied the display. They think we're still alone. They think the Council will hold us back. Will they? Owen asked. No, Daniel said. But we won't wait for them anyway. Laura, now walking with a cane but sharp as ever, entered the room. I've been decoding more Varn chatter, she said. They keep mentioning Phase 2. They think Clean Sweep was just the beginning. Daniel looked at his two closest friends, Laura, who had nearly died for the truth, and Owen, who had stood by him through every storm. Then we make sure there is no Phase 2. Human Diplomat alarms Galactic Council. The time for war has come. Part 1. The great chamber of the Galactic Council hung in silence, a vast dome of polished obsidian and living crystal orbiting far above the green swirls of Viridia Prime. Inside, the air hummed with unseen energy, cool and dry, scented faintly of ozone and alien spices. 15 species sat in tiered rings around a central platform, their forms as varied as the stars they came from. Tall chitinous Krell clicked their mandibles in slow rhythm. Gelatinous Varn pulsed softly in transparent tanks filled with briny fluid. The Lumen, beings of pure light encased in smooth quartz shells, glowed with calm, steady hues. All eyes, compound, liquid, or spectral, turned toward the lone human standing at the center. Daniel Carter adjusted the collar of his dark gray diplomatic uniform. He was not a soldier, not a general, not even the most senior envoy Earth had ever sent. But he was here now alone because no one else would believe what he had seen. His hands were steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He had rehearsed his words 100 times on the long journey from Sol system. But now, facing the full weight of the galaxy's oldest governing body, they felt small and fragile. He took a slow breath and activated the holo projector at his feet. A shimmering image rose into the air. A star map dotted with red markers along the outer rim, the farthest reaches of human expansion. 217 markers glowed, each one representing a colony ship, a mining outpost, or a research station. All of them had gone dark within the last 6 weeks. No signals, no emergency beacons, no debris fields, just gone. The Council has long treated humanity as children, Daniel began, his voice clear and calm despite the tension coiling in his chest. You say we rush to judgment. You say we fear shadows. But shadows do not erase 200 ships without a trace. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. The Krell delegate, Speaker Zorath, shifted his armored bulk forward. His voice came through a translator, dry and rasping like stone on stone. Diplomat Carter, your species has a history of exaggeration when threatened. Are you certain this is not internal conflict sabotage? Perhaps your own vessels turned on one another. Daniel did not flinch. We checked. Every last one. No signs of mutiny. No distress calls. No wreckage. Not even a single escape pod. It is as if they were plucked from space by an invisible hand. He tapped a command into his wristpad. The star map dissolved, replaced by grainy surveillance footage from a deep-range probe near the Helios expanse. A human freighter, the MV Horizon, drifted peacefully among asteroid fragments. Then, in less than 3 seconds, it vanished. Not exploded, not torn apart, simply ceased to exist as though someone had switched off a light. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Varn delegate's tank rippled with agitated waves. One of the lumen dimmed slightly, a sign of deep concern. This happened 217 times, Daniel said. Not once by accident, not once by chance. This was planned. This was precise. And it was aimed only at us. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The Council had kept peace for 300 years through careful neutrality, endless debate, and a strict policy of non-intervention. They prided themselves on avoiding war at all costs. But Daniel knew that peace built on blindness was no peace at all. You have called us impulsive, he continued. You have called us loud, emotional, too quick to anger. Maybe we are. But we are not blind, and we are not fools. Someone out there has decided that humanity is a problem to be removed. Quietly, efficiently, without witnesses. He stepped forward, his boots clicking softly on the smooth floor. I did not come here to beg for help. I came here to warn you. Because if they can do this to us without warning, without mercy, what is to stop them from doing it to you next? Silence returned, heavier this time. Even the ever-present hum of the station seemed to quiet. Speaker Zorath leaned back, his many eyes narrowing. And who do you believe is responsible, Diplomat Carter? Daniel met the alien's gaze without blinking. We do not have proof yet. Not the kind your courts would accept. But we have patterns, we have timing, and we have motive. The Varn hegemony has opposed every human trade agreement for the past decade. They called us infestors of clean space. They blocked our applications to the resource accords. And just last month, their fleet doubled its patrols along our shared border. The Varn delegate surged upward in its tank, fluid sloshing violently. Lies, it gurgled through its translator. We honor the Council's laws. We would never. Then explain the disappearances, Daniel cut in, his voice sharp but controlled. Explain why every vanished ship was within 50 light-years of Varn-controlled space. Explain why your long-range scouts were spotted near 3 of the last known coordinates. The Varn fell silent, its surface still trembling. Zorath made a clicking sound, thoughtful this time. Even if your claims are true, Diplomat, war is not the answer. The Council does not wage war. We mediate, we investigate. We wait. Wait for what? Daniel asked, his voice rising just enough to carry. For them to come here? For them to vanish your ships next? For them to erase your colonies while you debate protocol? He looked around at the assembled delegates, his expression not angry but deeply weary. I have spent my life believing in diplomacy. In words, in reason. But reason means nothing to those who have already chosen violence. And silence in the face of violence is not peace. It is surrender. He took one final step toward the center of the chamber, where the Council's ancient seal glowed faintly beneath the floor. So I say this not as a threat, but as a fact. The time for war has come. Not because humanity wants it, but because someone else has already started it. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The lumen flickered in unison, their light shifting from calm blue to a deep troubled violet. The Krell exchanged silent clicks. The Varn sank slowly back into its tank, its eyes darting nervously. Then Speaker Zorath stood. This session is adjourned. The Council will deliberate. As the delegates began to rise and file out, Daniel remained standing, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the empty space where the vanished ships had once been. He knew they would argue. They would doubt. They would delay. But he had done his part. He had sounded the alarm, and somewhere, far beyond the safety of Viridia Prime, the first shots of a new war were already being loaded. Back aboard the diplomatic frigate Aurora Light, Daniel Carter stood in the dim glow of the command briefing room, staring at a star chart that pulsed with bad news. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and strong coffee. Around him, Laura Bennett tapped rapidly on a data pad, her brow furrowed in concentration, while Captain Owen Grant leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, his face grim. Outside the viewport, the distant lights of Viridia Prime twinkled like cold stars. The Council's response had been exactly what Daniel feared: delays, doubts, and quiet accusations. Some delegates whispered that humanity had staged the disappearances to gain sympathy. Others suggested internal rebellion. None would say it aloud, but Daniel saw it in their eyes. They thought he had cried wolf. "We got something," Laura said suddenly, her voice low but urgent. She turned her pad toward Daniel. On the screen was a fragment of encrypted data, pulled from the black box of a derelict freighter found drifting near the edge of the vanished zone. The ship, the MV Starward, had been empty. No crew, no cargo, no signs of struggle. But its comms array had recorded a final burst before going dark. Owen stepped forward. "What is it?" "Varn Naval Code," Laura replied. "Heavily scrambled, but I ran it through the new decryption key we got from the Lumen. Buried in the signal is a command string. Project Clean Sweep. It's referenced in 3 separate logs, all tied to human-populated sectors." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Clean Sweep. Like cleaning us out," Laura nodded. "And get this, the timestamps match the disappearances almost exactly. Within hours," Owen rubbed his jaw. "That's not proof the Varn did it. Could be a false flag, or a rogue faction. Maybe, Daniel said, but it's more than we had yesterday. Just then, the ship's comm chimed softly. A priority message from Earth. President Elena Ruiz appeared on the main screen, her face lined with worry but her voice steady. Daniel, we've detected stealth signatures near Mars orbit. Confirmed Varn cloaking patterns. They're testing our defenses. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. How close? Close enough to count our satellites, she said. Admiral Torres is raising the alert level. We're not starting anything, but we're not blind either. The call ended. Silence filled the room again, heavier this time. Laura stood and walked to the viewport. They're watching us. Waiting to see how we react, Daniel joined her. And the council is watching us too. If we move first, they'll call us aggressors. If we don't move at all, we might not get another chance. Later that night, Daniel tried to sleep, but his mind raced. He kept seeing the faces of the missing, colonists, engineers, children who had never even left Earth's gravity well. He thought of the council's cold skepticism, the VAR,